What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to the Week 11 NFL Power Rankings show. No video from me on my end this week, recording this from my hotel room in Miami. My beautiful wife down here for a medical conference, so I'm tagging along for the ride. While I'm down here, by the way, going to be scouting some college quarterbacks out on the beach, getting a head start on the 2023 quarterback class that is really exciting, which means we're going to have some draft content here on the channel a little bit sooner than we normally would. So make sure you are subscribed for that. You're not going to want to miss it, breaking down my initial thoughts on this quarterbacks class. But vacation does not mean we get a break from power rankings. So here we are, week 11. Fun week to kind of break down how these teams are shaping up as we approach the home stretch. So let's go ahead and get into it. If you could do me a huge favor before we get started, and please do hit that like button down below. Really appreciate it. And let's go ahead and get started. So we're starting at the bottom per usual, and the Houston Texans are back at it in last place. They had a short-lived run outside of the 32 spot, but I don't think we're going to get a whole lot of disagreement here after they lose to the Giants in another week where they were competitive, but really didn't feel like they were going to win at any point in that game. But a new team is going to find themselves very close to the bottom here. The Las Vegas Raiders, whose embarrassing season rolls on, if you can even call it that. This defense, seriously, is so bad. Only 6 pressures, if that, I believe, against the Indianapolis Colts offensive line that has struggled. Matt Ryan comes back into the lineup, and they lose to a Colts team that we ranked dead last week. The Raiders offense has been able to move the ball in spurts, but goodness, what a sad, disappointing year for the Las Vegas Raiders, who find themselves in a very difficult window now after being pretty aggressive to be competitive now, and they find themselves in a really tough spot as they now are forced to look forward to the 2023 season with Derek Carr melting down into tears in his post-game conference. Then we have the Carolina Panthers at number 30, going to climb up a spot after the win over the Falcons. Still don't really know what to make of this Panthers team. If you go back over the last 3 weeks, 2, frankly, sad performances where they couldn't defend the run to save their life. But then on a short week, they come out and beat the Falcons and look pretty good. Show some rally defensively. Derek Brown looks awesome. PJ Walker, another good game. Such a hard team to know what to do with. But for now, I don't take the Panthers all that seriously. And we're going to start a run of NFC South teams now because we have the Saints coming in at number 29. The Andy Dalton rallying call seems to have worn off for this team. They can't buy a win. That's really back-to-back weeks now where this team just hasn't been able to put things together. You know, they fall down 20-10 against the Pittsburgh Steelers this week without a first-round pick. The Saints, like the Raiders, find themselves in a very confusing situation right now. But now we are going to take a tier jump up to teams that I just find simply more consistent and more frisky and competitive on a week-to-week basis. And that's going to start with another NFC South team, the Atlanta Falcons, who unfortunately are going to be dropping down 8 spots this week. Clearly overranked them last week. Thought that they were really starting to put things together offensively, showing some consistency with what was one of the better run games in the league heading into Thursday Night Football. But in that showing against the Panthers, they reminded us that this defense is toothless, and this offense is predicated on Arthur Smith using Kyle Pitts and Drake London as a decoy so that he can give the ball to Olamide Zaccheaus and Caleb Huntley. So it's just not a very good roster on a week-to-week basis. They're capable of losing to anybody, and this week was a reminder of that, dropping down 8 spots for the Atlanta Falcons. Now, a little positivity here as we get to the number 27 spot, the Indianapolis Colts, plus 5 this week, and a big part of this is Matt Ryan has re-entered the lineup. Now, I can't explain this for the life of me. Jim Irsay forces Frank Reich's hand to bench him, and then, I guess, in an effort to justify his hiring of Jeff Saturday after facing heavy scrutiny for it, he says, yeah, you can go ahead and start Matt Ryan so we can beat the Raiders this week and make this hiring look a little bit better. I can't really explain what's going on. Irsay is kind of off the rails a little bit with some of these decisions, but hey, the Colts picked up a win. Matt Ryan comes back into the lineup. The offense looks, better than it did with Sam Ehlinger. That's not a huge surprise. But this team, I don't really know what to make of them at this point in time. We'll see, I guess, if the Jeff Saturday era has more to it other than a win over the Raiders. Then number 26, the Pittsburgh Steelers. They get TJ Watt back into the lineup, and Kenny Pickett running around making some plays happen with his feet this week. You know a Mike Tomlin coached football team is going to fight and scratch and claw at least to be an average football team. So you can definitely picture a world where coming off the bye week now, putting some more talent on the defensive side of the ball, Kenny Pickett getting some more experience where this team can continue to climb. But for now, it's just one win against the Saints, and we need to see much more than that before we take this team all that seriously. But a good win, good week for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then the Chicago Bears at number 25. The offense just continues to dominate with Justin Fields and his legs. I think only Derrick Henry has more rushing yards than him over the last 3 weeks, which is just insane. Some of these explosive runs from Justin Fields are just special, man. He really has that Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray level scrambling ability. Still putting things together as a passer. But obviously, he has shown that he's going to put this offense on his back and put it some points. However, as we keep saying, this defense is completely out of talent after trading away Robert Quinn, trading away Roquan Smith, and it's just really hard to win football games when you're giving up over 30 points a week. So as good as Fields is, it is not really resulting in wins for the Chicago Bears. And the team that beat them this week, the Detroit Lions, climbing up to 24. And this is the second win in a row. And Detroit continues to do this. Every other week, it feels like. One week it's the offense shows up. The next week, the defense shows up. But not really able to put both sides of the ball together at once. So I don't really know what to make of that. But I do know that this is not a horrible football team. And the wins are starting to come. They've had a lot of tough, close losses this year. So you flip a coin a couple different times, and their record might come out a little bit differently on the season. But they're definitely playing better team football, at least down the stretch in these games, sealing these games late. So +4 for the Detroit Lions. And then the Cleveland Browns rounding out the frisky tier. Although, how much friskiness are they going to have left? A tough loss against Miami. I think they have to play the Bills this week, and then it should be the return of Deshaun Watson. But if they're out of the playoff picture, putting that man back into the mix, it's going to be fascinating to see kind of how this team's season ends up. We know their roster talent is certainly capable, but at what point does this team have to let Joe Woods go? This defense is wildly underwhelming. They let the Miami Dolphins run wild on them, an undisciplined defense all year long, and I don't buy it with Joe Woods as the defensive coordinator here. I think they got bigger problems on their hands there, even with Deshaun Watson around the corner. And then our new tier here is going to be a group of 4 teams grouped together as why aren't you better? These are teams with talent, most of them talented quarterbacks, certainly, and just teams that have had definitely flashes throughout the year, but haven't been able to put those wins in the left-hand column and put together some consistency. So starting at number 22, you guessed it, the Jacksonville Jaguars. We basically just described them. Trevor Lawrence the last couple weeks has played his best 2-week stretch of football on the season, but defensively, they went against the Chiefs this week, so how much can you really fault them for? But they definitely have some holes on that side of the ball. A bit of an incomplete team in their own right, but they are definitely a feisty team with some talent that just can't seem to find wins this year. And then the Denver Broncos at 21, they're going to drop down 4 spots, and this was definitely an underwhelming week for Russell Wilson. You looked at kind of how he played against Denver, this team coming off the bye week, you thought just maybe they would figure more out on the offensive side of the ball. And granted, they went against the Tennessee Titans defense that has been one of the best in the league, but only a 10-point performance this year. I saw a stat on Twitter that if the Broncos could have just scored 18 points per game, this is an 8-1 football team. So it goes to show you how one-sided these Broncos are, and considering what they gave up to go get Russell Wilson, this is going about as bad as you possibly could have imagined. So they're going to drop down into this why aren't you better tier. Couldn't describe them any better. And then the LA Rams at number 20. Them we at least kind of have some answers as far as why they aren't better, and it is the offensive line has fallen apart. And honestly, it's just overall injuries on offense at this point. Even Matthew Stafford misses this week with a concussion. You expect him to be back, but he'll be back without Cooper Kupp for a few weeks. So injuries really stacking up for the Rams that are pretty far out of the playoff picture at this point, and I don't really see a turnaround for this team considering the state of this offensive line and how dependent their offense is on Cooper Kupp. It could get ugly quick here for the Rams, and that first-round pick that they are giving the Detroit Lions, it goes to show you the risk you make when you trade those first-round picks, because the Lions could theoretically end up with 2 top 10 picks here, and the Rams pick just might be higher than Detroit's, which would be hilarious. But then we have the Arizona Cardinals rounding out the why aren't you better tier, and the Cardinals have less excuses. Sure, they have some injuries, and Zach Ertz gets hurt this week, which is a bummer, and Marquise Brown as well. But overall, I mean, we know this team's issues, although they did win this week with Colt McCoy coming in. They have found something in Rondale Moore, something I talked about on the Fully Inflated Football podcast last week. Yes, I do have a podcast. If you want to check it out, that link is in the description. But yeah, they're getting Rondale Moore going a little bit better. Even A.J. Green playing there with Colt McCoy. I'm not saying Colt McCoy is better for them long term, but I do think it made them really think about who their weapons are and how they need to use them, design their offense around the quarterback instead of through the quarterback. So if they're smart, which we know they're not, they might be able to do that better for Kyler Murray moving forward. But ultimately, I don't really trust that to happen. We've documented the Cardinals' issues to this point, and I don't think a win over the toothless Rams is going to change that too much. All right, then we have a short tier up here to the 18th team, and we have Washington and New England, 18 and 17 respectively, in the gritty tier. You could even add old school and gritty here. Both teams here feel very similar to me, though a little bit different stylistically. Two teams that are definitely going to have to win thanks to their defense and then finding ways to score offensively. A little bit differently, though, offensively. Obviously, Washington knocks down the Philadelphia Eagles. So Taylor Heinicke, man, when he is on, he is special. And good Taylor Heinicke is honestly like a top 10 quarterback. The problem is, how many quarters a game, if any, are you going to get good Taylor Heinicke? Because he is a true Jekyll and Hyde performer. And this Eagles game was no different. Slow start, played good for a couple quarters, played really good for a couple quarters, and then kind of tried to throw the game away a little bit. So, it's just so hard to know how consistent that offense is going to be. But I will say that defense is playing much better the last couple of weeks, and they get Chase Young back hopefully next week. So things are definitely trending up for the Washington Commanders, who are 5-5 now. Then the New England Patriots at number 17 on bye this week. We kind of know what this Patriots team is, and they're going to hang around just as we basically expect them to do in a Bill Belichick coach team. But then we have another tier jump up into the top 16 here, a 2-team tier. These are the potent but flawed teams. And the Green Bay Packers are going to find themselves getting a massive jump up this week. They took the big tumble of 10 spots last week, getting 7 of them back this week. And the biggest deal here, not only did they keep their season alive by upsetting the Green Bay Packers, they have an opportunity here on Thursday Night Football, just a couple days later, to get back to 5-6. But really the big difference here is the emergence of Christian Watson. And surprise, surprise, you give Aaron Rodgers a receiver that can get open and catch the football, and he starts throwing the ball like an MVP caliber quarterback again. So That's the biggest deal here. The offensive line is really solidified, getting healthier and getting a more consistent unit. So I do think the offense can find some stuff. And I think quietly getting a guy like Rudy Ford, who in his own right seems to be kind of a hidden gem. And as hard as I've been on Brian Gutekunst, I got to give him credit for finding a guy like Rudy Ford off the chopping block. But that means, in turn, a guy like Darnell Savage, who's been a liability for the Packers defense, slides into slot corner, something I've been calling for Joe Barry to make that move for a long time. So slight upgrades to the defense, not going to quite compensate for the loss of a Rashawn Gary, and we saw a lack of pass rush this week against the Cowboys. But obviously, if the offense can get a Christian Watson involved, get Randall Cobb back this week, get Romeo Doubs back in a couple weeks, you can see a way out for this offense to get something closer to what they were last year, which was the number one scoring offense in football. So they are potent, but we definitely have documented their flaws as well. We'll see if they can repeat offensively against the Titans on Thursday. Then the Los Angeles Chargers at number 15. It's weird to even call this team potent, but when you have a quarterback like Justin Herbert making some of the throws he made against the Niners, you know there's some potency in there. And you hope at some point they're going to get Mike Williams and Keenan Allen and Joey Bosa back into the mix here, which, again, adds some more potency. But this team definitely has issues, man. The defense has played a little bit better lately, but I still think they're a porous defense that really struggles to defend the run. Again, that's always the Chargers' issue. And just offensively, they're just not that explosive. I know the receivers are out, but honestly, man, like they have got to open things up with this playbook and the play calling before I get really excited about Justin Herbert and the Chargers, who have just been kind of mediocre offensively all year. So the Chargers feel pretty average as a football team, and they find themselves 15th for that reason. But we are now going to have a tier gap up, fitting that it's into the top 14 of the league as 14 teams make the playoffs. This is my looking good tier, teams that are shaping up to be playoff caliber teams. And to me, that starts with the New York Giants. They take care of the Texans, and here we are again. They win a one-score game. Granted, it was a late field goal by the Texans. This was one of their more dominant wins on the season. And I'm going to stick with the analogy, man. This is a team ran by a chess master playing with no headpieces. And granted, they have some good defensive players in Saquon Barkley, but this is really about the execution, about a team not beating themselves, and winning from a coaching perspective as far as play calling and scheming these guys open. So they're a stable, middle-of-the-road team, and they keep finding ways to win these close games, which is a credit to not just the coaching staff, but the mental toughness of the players on this team. Then the New York Jets basically staying put here on bye this week, as the Chargers are going to drop down below them. This defense, man, I do got to shout out the Jets defense. They are terrifying, and I'm excited to see what they can do in the home stretch here to hopefully solidify a playoff spot for the Jets. Then the Seattle Seahawks, they drop a game after, 4 straight wins? Geno, it feels like the last couple weeks they haven't really let him thrive. Felt like in that game they were running the ball, doing a lot of screens, and then all of a sudden, they get down 2 scores and they let Geno open things up and pass the ball vertically, and they start scoring again. So I'm not necessarily worried about the Seattle Seahawks. I think they'll be just fine. I don't know how high this team's ceiling is, and 12 feels about right. This is more about the Tampa Bay Bucks jumping above them, and the Titans did win this week, who were right behind them. So my thoughts on the Seahawks haven't really changed all that much. But then the Tennessee Titans at number 11. 11 really just feels like the right spot for the Titans. Genuinely one of the best defenses in the league, and they impress again, really dominating the Denver Broncos and forcing another bad game from Russell Wilson. Offensively, though, just no explosiveness whatsoever. They have their game plan. They're going to ride a very thin line and really just lean on that defense. And we know in the NFL in 2022, it's not that defense can't win you games. It's a lot more dependent on the execution and preparation and talent of who you're playing. So it's a tough game plan for them. They ride a fine line, but they do it so consistently, and man, are they well coached. So this really does feel like the right spot for the Titans, and until this formula changes for them, like maybe Treylon Burks gets back into the lineup and looks like a dominant rookie receiver, But until something like that happens where I trust this offense more, I'm really not going to falter on the Titans, I don't think, as a solid to good team, but nothing like super high upside, I don't think. Then the Tampa Bay Bucks at number 10. They kind of look a little bit like the old Bucks. They seem to have a little bit of a mental edge about them right now. Tom Brady's definitely heating up. Not that Brady's been bad all year, but to me, just playing a little bit better week by week, getting this offense kind of in sync a little bit better. But the defense the last few weeks has played much better as well, and that's really optimistic. Todd Bowles and this group, even without Shaq Barrett, have a lot of potential on that side of the ball. They're getting some guys back in that secondary, which is big. Joe Tryon this week really stepped up, something they're going to need with Shaq Barrett out for the season. So another team that I don't know if they're going to find that explosiveness to be some crazy great team, but fortunately for them, they are also in the NFC. So this is a team that can definitely get in and beat anybody, really. So things are definitely looking up for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But I do think they are a tier below our next group here, who I just think are genuinely good teams that are legitimate Super Bowl contenders that might need a few things to go their way, certainly, to pull some upsets on some of the top teams in the league if they were to win a Super Bowl. But well-rounded teams, more than capable of it. And that's going to start with the Cincinnati Bengals, who are actually going to drop down a spot. That's because we have a big riser this week who have really impressed me lately. So nothing against the Bengals. They're going to drop down one on bye week. Bengals fans won't like it. But again, there is another team just jumping ahead of them, while as my opinion on the Bengals is really staying put. Then the Baltimore Ravens, same deal. They're going to drop down one. Ravens also on bye this week. So opinion not changing on the Ravens there. The San Francisco 49ers are going to drop down 2 here. More of the same, just more impressed by other teams. I think the Niners are who we thought they were. They're a team that relies on run after catch. I think Jimmy Garoppolo picked up his 11th career win or something. He has a crazy good record. I think maybe 10-2 is what I saw, perhaps, in games where he doesn't throw a touchdown pass. But they're going to lean on that run after catch ability. The run game really good in this one against the Chargers, and this defense incredible. They're kind of like a juiced up version of like the Tennessee Titans in a lot of ways. But again, juiced up, maybe quite literally with Juszczyk on the team. But the playmakers they have really is going to give them a sustainable offensive game plan, even if Jimmy Garoppolo reduces the ceiling of that production. Then number 6, the Dallas Cowboys, again dropping down 2 because there are 2 teams that had big weeks and are really climbing ahead of Dallas. But my opinion on Dallas hasn't changed all that much, although they made one really stupid coaching decision this week that I think removed the identity of what makes the Dallas Cowboys great. When you think about the Dallas Cowboys this year, what comes to mind as far as their dominance? Micah Parsons screaming off the edge, sacking the quarterback, right? A legit defensive player of the year candidate, maybe the favorite as a pass rusher. Well, they looked at this matchup against Green Bay and figured he was their best bet to stop the run, and they took him off the edge. For the first time this year, he played primarily as an off-the-ball linebacker, only 10 out of 61 snaps off the edge, his lowest on the season, 1 pressure because of that low snap count. That was just bad game planning. I mean, sure, the Packers ran the ball, but where they were really gashed was Aaron Rodgers standing tall in the pocket in clean pockets, hitting these chunk plays to Christian Watson. So I think that's where the Cowboys went wrong. Their offense moved the ball. I think defensively, yeah, they're a little bit squishy against the run. That's kind of who they are. But to take your biggest strength and neuter it, not that Parsons is like a horrible off-the-ball linebacker, but it's just hard to make an impact from that position, and he's not as good at it. So Dan Quinn, a head-scratching coaching decision that I think may have cost this team the game. I know there's more to it than that, but I don't really also look at the Cowboys and think terribly differently. I can't imagine that that's going to be their game plan moving forward. They would be morons to keep Micah Parsons at off-the-ball linebacker. But now into the top 5 and into some of those teams, as I mentioned, that really impressed me this week. So the Miami Dolphins at number 5, jumping up 4 spots, and this offense just might be at this point the best offense in the NFL. I never thought I would say that. I knew it had a high upside with Tyreek Hill and Waddle and the play calling, but Tua himself has been fantastic. I'm not going to quite go like to the lengths of MVP discussions yet. He missed a lot of time. He made up ground this week. But he certainly has played at that level for the last 3 weeks. And as I said last week, the Drew Brees comparisons are on with Tua because he really is playing at that high of a level. This week he did it without Tyreek Hill, getting guys like Trent Sherfield going on a beautiful dime to my corner of the end zone as I was live in attendance. Just a nice little fade route, throwing a touchdown to Alec Ingold, continuing to be efficient in the red zone where I think he is showing an elite trait this season. So the Dolphins offense is insane. Now, defensively, they need to get healthy. That's really what it's all about there. We know they have talent there. We know the coaching is good, but on a macro scale, this defense does look like a unit that could potentially hold them back in the playoffs if they can't get healthy. I saw Byron Jones. It's looking a little shaky as far as if he's going to be back this year. They've been obviously fine this week against the Browns and Jacoby Brissett, but even then it wasn't insane. So yeah, that's kind of the weak spot on the Dolphins, but maybe the best offense in the NFL if they keep playing like this. And then number 4, the Minnesota Vikings, who sealed the deal on the game of the year easily and probably a game of the century candidate. I was getting texts and tagged on Twitter like, oh my God, did you see this game? And I was like, oh yeah, cool. Like, I can't wait to watch it because I obviously missed this. I was at that Dolphins game and I loaded up this morning and I was glued to my TV. Like, are you kidding me? The amount of crazy things that happened in this game, and Justin Jefferson being a large chunk of those crazy things. I mean, that was one of the most dominant receiver performances in the league. The fact that he can just bail them out of tough situations, and this isn't the first time he's done this. Like, they know in a pinch, just go to Justin Jefferson, and he gives them a chance. And then you raise the floor with Kirk Cousins playing well, the offensive line playing well. Dalvin Cook broke off a big touchdown run this week. So the offense looking good. And then, really defensively, Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter have opened things up for them to at least generate turnovers and create some chaos up front. So the Vikings definitely look like one of the best teams in the NFL. They obviously, go into Buffalo, knock off the Bills. That is just huge for this team. And starting to think about the S word in Minnesota once again. But it might sound weird, but I am still going to keep that top tier, even though we saw 2 of these teams lose this week. Now, I think that gap definitely was reduced this week. But when I look at these rosters of these top 3 teams and the consistency of their season as a whole, I still think these are the 3 best teams in football, even if the recency bias would tell you this is a little bit strange. It's how I view my rankings. Never going to overreact to one given week. But again, that gap is closing. So at number 3, the Philadelphia Eagles, they pick up their first loss of the season. I was sitting next to a local Eagles fan down here in Miami, and the game ended, and he was like, you know what, it just kind of feels good to get that one out of the way. And I think that's a good way to put it. They lose 2 fumbles at the end of this game, some tough breaks with the refs. I don't look at that game and walk away worried about the Eagles. It's just a reminder of how hard it is to win in this league and how hard it is to go undefeated in this league. So the monkey's off their back. They can get back to work, and I don't expect the Eagles to really slip up, even though they did lose to Washington this week. It is what it is. I'm not really worried about them. So I'm going to keep them in this tier above because we know that this is such a complete football team. But the Buffalo Bills are going to drop down 1. I think my opinion on them is reducing because Josh Allen just is not playing good football lately. Was not good against the Packers 3 weeks ago. Was not good last week. Frankly, made some really big mistakes that cost them that Jets game. And really big mistakes here against the Minnesota Vikings as well late in this game that arguably cost them that game. Now, the big reason they're in those games is because Josh Allen does some crazy shit and makes big plays happen, but you can't do that if you're Josh Allen, and it's especially with a quarterback that we've talked about making those mistakes. He, for the first maybe 6 weeks of the season, was weeding those out and not making a lot of those head-scratching interceptions and turnover-worthy plays. But as long as he's doing that 2 or 3 times a game, you're seeing the ramifications of that. I also think, like, every time something happens in the back end of this defense, it's a backup player in the secondary. They're just so beat up back there. How sustainable is that? I think that's an issue for them as well. No Gregory Rousseau. They have a lot of injuries. So the Bills are going through some things, and they're going to drop down 1 to the Kansas City Chiefs, who take care of the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. Just kind of business as usual. Patrick Mahomes lighting it up. I do think Mahomes is the front runner for MVP right now, and the Chiefs kind of in the driver's seat now as the Bills have fallen down a little bit. And that could be huge for the Chiefs to get that home game in Arrowhead in what I'm still expecting to probably be Bills-Chiefs when all is said and done. But a team like the Miami Dolphins is certainly approaching if these guys can't roll forward like the Dolphins look like they're doing. So there are your Week 11 power rankings. I really hope you guys enjoyed. Definitely drop your comments down below where you agree, where you disagree. Make sure you like the video. It really helps me out. Make sure you subscribed. We've got some draft content just around the corner. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you later. Peace out.